You're listening to Parent MD, the podcast where top pediatric experts do the homework for you, sharing clear and trustworthy medical advice so parents feel empowered to take the very best care of their kids.
Well, hey, welcome to Parent MD. My name is Alex Seibert. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Parent MD, and clearly not Dr. Honecker if you're watching this or listening to it. But I sort of asked Josh if I could do this because I have real questions. I have a 3-year-old who is, knock on wood, a good sleeper, but I'm a little bit traumatized by the first go around. And I have a second one baking right here in my belly, and I'm a little bit concerned. I've lost a lot of sleep on the topic that we're going to talk about today. So I would like to introduce my guests here. We have Katelin and Ashley, and they're with Loullaby Infant Sleep Consulting. Sorry, you are consultants. Would you guys like to give a little intro? I know that we've done an episode with Dr. Honecker before, and I'll link it in the show notes. But I would like for you guys to give a little introduction and tell people who you are and what you do.
I am Katelin Shouse. I am a NICU nurse and have done that for almost
Bless
10 years.
Sorry for the craziness that I had when I was there, but
hey, it is what we love and what we're passionate about.
You.
I also have nannied for a lot of families over the years, Ashley being one of those families. That is actually how we met, which is really fun. And we are both certified sleep consultants.
Yes, pediatric.
I know, I'm like, where's
Specialize in infants, but I'm Ashley Smith, mom of 3, 2, 4, and 6. So yes, it is possible, Alex,
Thank
to
you.
sleep when you have more than one child. History would be NICU nurse, as well as family nurse practitioner in the newborn nursery, and now home with my littles more than anything, and then co-founding Loullaby Infant Sleep Consulting. So we are here to break some myth busters, I hear.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
We need to bust all the myths because obviously, like, I read a bunch of with my role at Parent MD, I read a lot about sleep anyways, but luckily most of it comes from you, thank God. But I've read a lot about sleep, and I remember when Lewis is my first one, there was a day, and of course, you know, we had Lewis during COVID, and I'm trying to work at night. I'm still working full time. Both of us are working full time. Trying to work at night. I would put him down for bed, and as soon as I would like sit down at my computer and like get myself a cup of tea or a beer or something and just like finally get to do my thing for an hour, he would wake up, and I about lost my mind because I was like, okay, this is my one time to like get a solid hour of start to finish. And he would wake up. And so there was one day that I looked at my husband and I said, we are either paying $500 for this course online, or we're going to follow this thing, and it's going to be hard, but we're going to do it. And so it was a cry it out method. It was, you know, put him in the room, shut the door, check on him in 10 minutes and whatever. And so I made him do the hard part, and you got to go check on him. I can't go in there. Like, I will never come out. I will throw in the towel. And so we worked through it. Now he's a great little sleeper because we came up with a routine and you know, found something that worked for us, but it was painful. Mm-hmm. But the first myth I need you to bust is, will I ever sleep again? Because swear, there were nights that my husband said to me, sorry, Sean, we are never going to sleep again. We're never going to sleep again. And so we were up like stressed out because we were like, okay, for the rest of our lives, we're going to be running on 3 hours of sleep.
Yes. And I'd be happy to talk about that one because I also have a memory being at my baby shower with my first, who's now 6, going on 7. But it's like, give advice for the mom to be. Yeah. And like one of the biggest piece of advice I feel like you give to people, or were given to me that day that I can remember, are, well, sleep while you can. And I'm thinking, I have a basketball in my belly. I'm not sleeping anyways right now. Yeah. So what do you mean, you know? Yeah. So yes, let's talk about it. You definitely will sleep when you have a baby again. We like to start working with families when a baby's around 6 to 8 weeks. And there's a reason why, right? The first month of life really is survival mode, right?
Yeah.
You have just labored a child. You are healing mentally, physically, emotionally. We need you to bond with the baby, navigate feeds, you know, all that good stuff. You're feeding on demand. If you're nursing, you're waiting for that milk to come in. Like, there's so many factors that go on. So yes, the first few weeks of life, I fully believe firsthand, experienced, it's survival mode.
Yeah.
But once you have a baby who is about 6 to 8 weeks and you have that day-night confusion all sorted out, you can sleep again. And you will sleep again. And we can start working with you as young as 6 to 8 weeks to really get some solid stretches at night. What we have learned through training is that the majority of babies, so majority being about 90% of babies are able to sleep through the night anywhere between like 10 and 12 hours, somewhere between 3 and 6 months. And that is a wide range. But if you think about survival mode for, 6 to 8 weeks, you can see the light, right? By 3 months or so, there are a lot of babies that can sleep through the night between 10 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
So myth busted that you can sleep when you have a baby. Living proof, got 3.
It'll happen. It'll come back.
And
to
it'll
you.
happen.
Can be,
and you don't have to wait until they're in college or they're, or they're 10. Like it can happen as early as 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Like it's possible.
Yeah.
Promise.
I had somebody tell me, like right when I was in the thick of it, they were like, "Hey, if you can get to 4-hour stretches, you will feel like a new person. Like all you got to do is get to that 4-hour stretch." And I swear that first night, I texted her the next day and said, "Oh my God, I love you. I slept 4 hours. I feel like I could do anything right now."
New woman.
Yeah, and she was like, "Okay, don't
wait
go
till
crazy.
Wait till you get 5.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
about 6?
She was like, "You just need 4 hours, man."
Yeah.
And so once we got to that like milestone, we were like, "All right, this is possible. This is just just steps."
Yes.
To it.
Very small steps. Because it's exhausting when you've got a kid that's awake every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Needing to feed.
Yeah.
And really that leads right into another myth that I think we get asked a lot. And that is one of those that if I am exclusively breastfeeding, my baby can't sleep through the night, which is not necessarily the case. There are some babies who do need to feed more often throughout the night, but it is, the same expectation would be that anywhere between 3 and 6 months, whether you're breastfeeding, bottle feeding, formula, exclusively pumping, that regardless of how you're feeding your baby, as long as they're getting what they need, then you are still able to get a nice solid stretch of nighttime sleep. And our expectation for our smaller kids, like our 6 to 8 week olds, would be that like we get them down to 2 middle of the night feeds. So you're not awake every 2.5, 3 hours. You're getting a nice good stretch of maybe 4 or 5 hours. So then you can wake up the next morning and be like, "Oh, I feel refreshed."
Yeah. This is doable.
Yes, having 2 nighttime feeds instead of 4 or 5 is so much more manageable than being awake more often than that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's some, and I'm not sure, I'm like positive there's some science too. Like, there's certain like cycles that you go through, and there's some deep sleep and light sleep and things like that. And so I'm sure there's something to that 3-4 hour, 5 hour mark where you like get good rest. You're actually like in the deep REM cycle, I guess.
Right.
Can you tell how much I've read about sleep? It made me so nervous. We were a hot mess April of 2020, but I think everybody was, so it doesn't matter. But.
Yeah. And now going into baby number 2, you will have more resources and won't feel like you're just out here trying to survive.
Yeah.
Because we can help with that as early as 6 to 8 weeks, which is, just to give you kind of a roadmap of what to expect at that really young age, because we don't have super high expectations for being able to do 12 hours at 8 weeks. That's just not reality.
Right.
But setting you up for age appropriate expectations and knowing that like we can get a healthy foundation in place as early as that. So by the time a lot of moms are going back to work at 10 or 12 weeks, you've got a kiddo that like, again, you're getting another like 5 or 6 hour stretch at night instead of being awake every 2 hours before you're having to go work a full day and be a productive human being.
Yeah. And I think baby number 2 will be, I know that every baby is different. And so like, according to what I'm feeling and seeing like on the ultrasound, this one will be wild. So, but he's going to be sleeping right next to his brother. And so I'll be interested to see how that works, because we're definitely not doing the method we did initially, because the initial one was the cry it out method, where we went and sat outside on the porch with the monitor because it was so painful to sit inside. And so, yes, I will be calling you in August and saying, please come over and help me, because I need my perfect little angel child, 3-year-old, to sleep. And I also need this next one who, to be determined how well he'll like to sleep. We're going to need something different. We've already discussed, like, okay, that's clearly not going to work again.
Right.
So what are we going to do? But
Yeah.
And you mentioned cry it out. So we have a lot of families that come to us and say, like, cry it out. I can't cry it out. That means I can't sleep train. So a true cry it out, like, is I'm going to close the door at bedtime and I'm not going to enter that room until the morning. So that really requires, like, no training. That's not even really a method we teach or believe in, or I couldn't do as a mom myself. So I would never expect somebody else to close the door and not ever enter until the next morning. So I feel like cry it out sometimes can be confusing, right? But a true cry it out, you don't do anything the whole night long.
yeah.
And that's not always what sleep training is.
Right. Yeah. Because there are so many people that come to us when they are desperate for sleep and they think the only option is to cry it out. And that, again, is something that we will never encourage a family to do, because I can't imagine shutting the door, because it's brutal. It's brutal for everyone involved. So instead, the goal is to minimize the tears as much as possible. And because there will always be some amount of crying, purely because that's the way that they're communicating to us that, first of all, they're tired. You are trying to catch them when they're tired and they're ready to go to sleep. But then at the same time, making sure that we're giving them a little bit of space to figure out, can I do this on my own?
Yeah.
So not just leaving them to their own devices, and making sure that they know that, like, we are close by and you're safe and we love you. But that also our expectation is that we learn how to sleep in our own space.
Yeah.
That way you have a kid that can learn to sleep through the night over time, without just closing the door on them and leaving them to their own devices.
Let them feel sort of abandoned and left alone.
Right.
Yeah.
What about the myth we get a lot about never wake a sleeping baby? Yeah?
Yeah. I threatened hardcore Sean a couple of times, like, do not wake him up. And then he would remind me, okay, well, according to your schedule that you set up, like, you said that he needs to be awake at this amount of time and he needs to do this. And I'm like, all right. But, clearly, like, I was running on fumes at that point.
Right.
So I've only woken him up a couple of times, but are you supposed to or no?
I mean, during the day, yes,
Yeah.
100% during the day. I mean, unless your pediatrician is saying to you, he or she needs to eat in the middle of the night, please wake up for that feeding, for that caloric intake, for that nutritional value in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I never recommend waking a baby up at night.
Yeah.
When they wake, let them sleep at night, and they will wake up when they're hungry or they need something or they're uncomfortable, etc. But during the day, by all means, wake that little baby up. You have to. And the reason behind it is that babies only need a certain amount of sleep in a 24-hour period. Their requirements do change the older they get. So a newborn sleep requirements in 24 hours is a lot different than a 10-month-old or a 18-month-old. But if you let them sleep all day, they're getting all their sleep requirements by 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right. So then they are going to be up more in the afternoon, and they're going to get really overtired. Then they're going to be up even more at night. So 100%, if that baby's sleeping during the day and it's been, let's say, 2 hours or 3 hours since they fed last, wake that little baby up so they can feed, they can burn energy, and they can save some of their sleep requirements for later in the afternoon and for the evening.
Yeah. Duly noted.
I always tell
Mental
people,
note.
because I'm like, if you get too much daytime sleep, you're stealing from nighttime. So you'll either see them more often middle of the night,
Yes.
or they'll be awake early in the morning, letting you know, like, hey, I got a little bit too much yesterday.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you get stuck in that pattern of playing catch up during the day, and then they're waking at night.
Yeah.
So then you get
Then
stuck
you get, like,
in that
reversed.
cycle. Yes. So instead, you're just trying to teach their bodies during the day to know this is when we should nap and for how long. That way, they're able to, over time, get to where they sleep on a predictable schedule and sleep well through the night, because we've taught their bodies what to expect during the day.
Yeah. I feel like that's sort of an old school mentality.
Yes.
I remember hearing my mom say, well, don't wake him up. Don't wake him up. And then
that baby
I
up?
would say, okay, but he needs to eat now, because if he doesn't eat now, then he's going to blah, blah, blah. And I would explain the whole thing to her. And she totally was like, oh, I get it. Like, I understand. Like, I understand you have a schedule. So I'm not going to interfere with that.
Yes.
And then, once she I think once she saw and went through the process of putting Lewis down, once we left him for the first time at her house or left her at the house with him, she understood like, oh, I get it. I now I know why you woke him up, and now I know like how important that is for this 7 or 7:30 period. So,
and I think that also kind of leads into feeling like sleep training means that you have to be on a super rigid schedule because of course, like we don't want you to let your baby sleep all day because then it steals from your nighttime.
Yep.
But at the same time, there is always flexibility.
Yeah.
We always tell people that there's like 30 minutes ish of wiggle room with your wake up time, your bedtime. So like if they're cutting teeth, let them sleep a few extra minutes. It's not going to totally throw off the rest of your day, while at the same time being mindful that like we don't want to take a 3-hour nap in the morning. Yeah. So you still have some time to spread throughout the rest of the day. Yeah. But allowing them that little bit of flexibility is perfectly fine.
Yeah. I remember, bringing Lewis home from the NICU, and they were very strict 3-hour windows, right? For him at least. And I followed the 3-hour windows for a while, but then I would get to a point where I'd be like, okay, well, I'm out for coffee with a friend, but he needs to wake up. And I was, it was so stressful to try to plan like the 2 hours that you had while he was awake, or the 1 hour while he was asleep, or whatever the timing was. It was so stressful for me to try to figure it out. And finally I realized, okay, like let's just give a little, if we're at a birthday party and he can't sleep because it's loud, it's okay because we're leaving in 30 minutes anyways. Right. It's okay if we push it a little bit. And so that's really helped us, I think, especially as he's gotten older, to be able to like navigate birthday parties at night, or like, longer dinners with people, or a longer weekend where we're staying up and watching a movie or something like that. You can sort of give a little bit, and he still knows it's Sunday night. Now we got to get back into our routine, and then Monday morning is when we're waking up, kind of thing. Yeah. Except for daylight savings time, which is trash.
Throws everybody off.
But yeah, whoever invented that clearly never had a toddler or a kid. Right. So that is
and I keep thinking that like, oh, maybe we'll change our times one last time.
Yeah. I don't think so either. No, until you get a mom up in there.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just because to talk about what you were speaking on, like just because you're sleep training does not mean you're like homebound and can't do other things.
I felt very much like that initially.
Like I can't go. I have a baby who needs to sleep. Oh, I can't go. I have a baby who needs to sleep. So part of it too is training little babies can sleep on the go, you know, like when you're out and about. And I think once you sleep train a baby, for me, I like to teach parents that it's just a skill. Like if you flip the switch in your mind that sleep's a skill, just like crawling, walking, using a fork, saying those ABCs, it takes practice. So it's like if you flip that switch and think that sleep is a skill, I have to train you how to do it. It makes it just so much easier and more enjoyable. And then you have that pride, like, hey, I taught you how to do that. You know, I'm your mom. Who else better to teach you than me, right? Yeah. And, you know, when you're watching your child learn how to crawl, do they fall? Like, how many times a day, right? Or do they, when they're walking, do they fall? And we laugh and we think it's so cute. And it is cute, but in sleep training is kind of similar if you look at it that way. Like, I'm training you how to sleep. Are you going to pick up on this right this second? No. But with some consistency and some repetition, I can train you to know what sleep looks like and what sleep feels like. Yeah. And like, I mean, it's so prideful, like, right? I'm so proud of you that I taught you how to do that. Yeah. So I think a lot of it too is just like, flipping the switch in the parent's mind, like going into sleep training with a different attitude, with a different mindset, that it's a positive thing, not a negative thing. Yeah. Cause we get that a lot, I think. Like, I'm nervous to sleep train. It just has so many, it just seems mean, or it seems really negative, or it's not for me. Yeah. Kind of thing.
Feels really rigid.
It feels really rigid, and it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. I think it's just really important to just train. I like to just use the verbiage, like, let's train him to know what sleep feels like and what it looks like. So then wherever you're at, whether you're at grandma's or on the beach or an airplane or, you know, wherever you are, that they can sleep because they know what it feels like and what it looks like.
And they know sort of how. I mean, it's just like potty training.
How to do it. Yeah.
You know, it's just like, you got to show them, you got to walk them through a couple of times.
You got to watch them fail, and you got to teach them how to do it. Yeah. Yep. And I think the biggest thing too is that it takes patience, for one. A lot of patience. And as a parent, I mean, I'm in this phase, y'all, that my 2-year-old girl likes to get dressed herself. She likes to put on her own diaper.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got these little cute jelly shoes right now. She calls them jelly beans. And she likes to put her jelly beans on backwards. Well, that does not go well. And the diaper's backwards. I'm like, whoo, okay.
Yes.
Fill my patience cup up, please, Lord.
Yes.
So it's hard when you're trying to sleep train too, because you're like, why can't they get this? Let me just go do that for you. It's so much quicker and so much easier. So I think the hardest thing too is just saying to a parent, hey, listen, like this, we got to be patient with their pace of learning. It might not be as fast as you want it to be, but just be patient.
Yeah. And we talked about this in a previous in a podcast with Dr. Katie Hopkins. She's a child and adolescent psychologist, and she talks a lot about resilience and like how you need to start building resiliency in your kid. And she mentioned sleep training along the same lines. Like they are learning new skills at a totally different pace, and just because you have the solutions or like it makes you feel anxious that they are uncomfortable, you've got to step back and let them be a little bit uncomfortable and figure it out. And I would imagine, and she related a lot of it to sleep and like how that's such a tough thing for parents to watch, especially when you're running on fumes and you haven't slept yourself and you're sort of in a, you feel a little bit desperate sometimes that you just kind of have to like take the selfless road and like make sure that they are learning and like going through the process of learning the skill. And then it will like all play out for you better later. And that was like mind blowing to me.
Right.
Yes.
I am huge about managing expectations for ourselves, but also for creating the expectation for kids so they know where the boundaries are.
Yeah.
Because I feel like kids thrive when they know like this is where the boundary is and this is the expectation of me. Yeah. Obviously that is huge with sleep, but it's also, I think with meals even. Yeah. Like when kids know that like, okay, we have breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner, they know what to expect and when. So then they're better able to regulate because they know what's going on.
Yeah. They love to know what's going on.
Exactly.
The whole expectation and routine thing, like I try not to be crazy about it. But it feels very natural to have a normal routine. And it feels very good, like for both of us.
It's safe for them too.
Yes, totally.
So I think the earlier you start just implementing healthy habits, setting that foundation, the better off you're going to be. I mean, 6 to 8 weeks seems frightening. Like, well, I can't sleep train at 6 to 8 weeks. But 6 to 8 weeks sleep training looks very different than a 8-9 month old sleep training. Yeah. Right. There's a point in time where sleep habits are really formed. So if you catch it a little bit early, it makes everything much easier.
Yeah. Well, I wish I would have known that with my first, because I got to a point where I was desperate. And then once I was desperate, I wasn't thinking totally logically during nap time and whatever. And I had a lot of like emotional buildup around it because I was nervous about laying them down. I was really anxious about it. And so I had a lot of feelings around it. And I wish I would have started earlier, just like building the foundation of, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's the routine. We're just going to start. I knew that we needed to have a routine. And so we always like read to him and stuff. But like past the reading, we didn't really know what to do, and we didn't know where to turn. I think that's when I started following you guys on Instagram. Thank you much. And so like I picked up cues and stuff from different people, but yeah, I'll be calling you in August. Okay. Baby's come in July. So yes. I'll be calling you.
We are ready.
Yeah. I'll need ready. It. Do you guys have any other myths that we had on the list?
Let's talk about how I think one of the myths is like, oh, my baby's yawning, time for nap. So it's more of like following sleepy cues to help guide naps and like predict your day. So we like to teach more about, age appropriate, like wake windows, guiding your day, guiding your schedule versus sleepy cues. Because let's be honest, like this is my 3rd cup of coffee this morning. If I were going by sleepy cues, I would probably be in bed all day, right?
Yeah.
So yes, sleepy cues do mean something, but let's not use them to just drive and guide
the whole
naps,
day, the whole schedule.
Right? Because what can happen, and parents get very frustrated, I feel like, is my baby was yawning, I laid him down. They woke up 15 minutes later. And then they're yawning again. So I laid them down 30 minutes later. So what can happen is they aren't awake long enough, right? They don't spend enough time awake, burning energy, kicking, playing, feeding, being stimulated. So they have a short nap. And then a short nap is just that cat nap. It just fuels you for a little bit. It feels good when you first wake up, but then you're tired again. So a lot of times if you let these little yawns or the quick rub of the eye kind of guide your day, short nap, short window, short nap, short windows, you're at the end of the day, you got a really fussy kid because they haven't slept well. So we really focus on following what we call just age appropriate wake windows. And those change every single month. And if you keep the baby entertained and stimulated during those wake windows, then you're going to get tired and yawny. You're going to see those sleepy cues when you want to see them. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And also when a baby starts getting more consolidated sleep at night and wakes up more restful, they're not as tired in the morning, first thing yawning. Yeah. So I would bust that myth and say, don't always follow sleepy cues.
Just because
they're yawning and rubbing their eyes may or may not mean that they're tired. Yeah. Kind of not to ignore it because they do mean something, but not to solely focus on it. Yeah. Let's flip that switch once again and solely focus on an age appropriate wake window for my child.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the last questions I have, this is a little bit off script, but I hear a lot and I read a lot about regressions and like. I had an app that would tell me he's going through a leap or he's going through yada yada, but like I couldn't track it because my kid was born early, and so I couldn't keep track of like here's his gestational age and blah blah blah, and like I was all confused. So I just was like, all right, I will know a leap whenever he has a leap because like nobody's sleeping in the house. So is that a real thing? Like, is it at 4 months? I heard 4 months, 6 months.
I think that you hit a lot of different regressions, right? The biggest one, I think, the first one, right, is that 4 month sleep regression. Oh, we've hit this 4 month sleep regression. Yeah. Do I believe in that? 100%. Is it real? 100%. But we fully believe that sleep regressions directly correspond with milestone development. What's happening at 4 months old? They are mobile. They're starting to roll. Most of our 4 month olds are still swaddled, right? So now your arms are down, you're trying to roll. So what happens is that when they're waking up at night, 'cause we hear a lot, my baby's been a great sleeper and now we've hit this 4 month old regression. They're up every 2 hours, right? I believe you, 100% believe you. But a part of that is like, let's think about what's happening developmentally at 4 months old. They need to be mobile. They need to be free. It's time to get out of the swaddle because what happens is that they're going through sleep cycles all night long, right? When they wake up, they're used to just going back to sleep, but now they want to move. They want to roll. So they're kind of fully waking themselves up because they're practicing those new developmental skills. A lot of times we're like, hey guys, this crib's kind of like a playpen. Yeah. You're having this 6 month regression because when they wake up at night, they want to sit up and roll and scoot and all this stuff. You're having this 9 month old regression because when they wake up at night, they've got a playpen to figure out how to stand and pull up and like move and be mobile. So do I believe that there are regressions and you hit road bumps and like things were going well and bam, 100%. But I think it's more about looking at the whole picture and the development of the child and like correlating it together that like this regression is directly related to this development. Yeah. And you have to just work through that development. So now we're mobile. Now what do you do? Yeah. Well, we got to get out of the swaddle. We got to respond a little bit differently. So you treat every regression, got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah. I also think that you can have a baby that sleeps beautifully for the first handful of weeks and then sleep habits start to form. So right around that 3 month mark is when you see circadian rhythms and melatonin production. So all of that is changing for them. So if you have good habits in place, great. You've got a good sleeper from the start. If you've got some other habits in place that might not be ideal, then usually around that 3.5 to 4 month mark, this dreaded regression is usually when those habits are starting to like show themselves.
Oh, I see.
So a lot of the time, you'll have a kid that like did fine early on, but now that we've got some new developmental things going on, they're like, wait, what do I do here? And what do you expect of me? So those habits that are not ideal tend to show themselves right around that time. There's also most of the time, so typically there's like a 4 month regression and an 8 month regression. Yeah. Usually somewhere in there is when people are like, help, SOS. Yes. And I also find that correlates with needing a schedule shift because there's a lot of times that like we might need to stretch wake windows or we might need to drop a nap. And so a lot of the times if you've had a kid that has slept beautifully, has good routines in place, sleeps independently, and then has new nighttime wakings or early morning wakings, we might need to shift.
Yeah. I think that's one of the hardest lessons, but also the first lesson I learned as a mom is that like as soon as you get comfortable and used to it,
It shifts.
it's going to change.
Especially
Absolutely.
the first
And
year.
that was
and
so
6 months
frustrating.
Especially, yeah.
Yeah, it was so frustrating for me. Not to mention, like, you know, I was raising a baby in COVID and like
Right.
took all my stuff home. Like, so everything was already up in arms. And so maybe I was sort of conditioned to do it. But
Once
it
you
was
get into a
lot.
groove,
Yeah.
it
It's all
shifts.
changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think,
Don't
I
get
think,
comfortable.
yeah, I think that's why, you know, when we would have a really good schedule and a really good process for going to bed, that we would be so frustrated. And that's why I started with the first miss. Like, why will I ever sleep again? Because we felt so desperate. We were like, oh man, this 8 hours is great, or this 6 hours is great. And then we would like get smacked in the face with, nope, up every 2 hours, or he's sick now. Okay. So
Yes.
now you're up every hour. And like, can you survive that? And the reality is, yes, you can. Sometimes you might need help, but
Yes.
you can do it. Thank you.
And it was so wonderful. You're doing it again.
It was so great. I waited 3 years so I could suppress all those endless nights, but it'll happen again. But anyways, thank you guys for coming in. Thank you guys for sharing, because I told you I have a lot of questions, like need a lot of help, need a lot of reassurance. Even my second go around, like I know how much literally sleep I lost over sleep. That and that sounds crazy, but even when the baby was sleeping, we were stressed out about sleep, and that was the number one thing that made us nervous. And so this is a topic that I think everybody needs to hear. So thank you guys for being
Yes, thanks for
today.
having us. This was great.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks.